Did you have to do any announcements before I start?
I announced a 10-minute warning.
Okay, cool.
So,
All right. Well, I guess we'll just go ahead and get started. Do we have the recording started up, Tessa? Okay, perfect. All right. Well, hey, everyone. My name's Steven Roberson, and I am glad to be back at the club. I was here last as a career advisor, walking people through probably the career fair. That was sort of the last big thing I helped with while I was there. Um, and I always have loved this group. Back in the day when Yanni and some of the others were leading it, they did such a good job just like rounding people up. And this is one of my favorite clubs because everyone here is always super passionate and super like real about what they're trying to do. So that's how I'm going to try to be with you today. I do have a little presentation that I whipped together. It's not a very long one and on purpose because I want to leave a lot of time for questions. But what I'm just going to show you is just a couple of things that have been helping me as I made that transition from a structured environment like working at SCAD back into freelance. So it's going to consist of two things. It's going to be a little bit of story and then some art hacks. So hopefully y'all will get something from at least one of those. The story is just sort of my journey and what I've been up to lately. So I started out doing art like a lot of us when I was real young, and then I went to SCAD and got my degree in sequential art in 2011. And at that time, that's right when the Great Recession hit. So we were kind of figuring out like, okay, what do we do now? And also, I had no clue what I was doing. I remember being in my final quarter and I was like, I want to do concept art, but I don't really know what to make. Like, so I would just make stuff, you know? And it didn't really have a lot of focus to it. And not surprisingly, it didn't really go anywhere. Thankfully, I did get some freelance work through friends and through people I knew and kind of getting referrals, but I didn't really know what to do with it. So through that process, I ended up coming back to SCAD and I ended up getting my master's degree in illustration in 2018. And during that whole time, I have been freelancing, working odd jobs, as well as just continuing to grow my skills. After I graduated from the grad program in 2018, that's whenever I eventually got the job as a career advisor at SCAD. And one of the big things that led me to do that is I actually really love helping people think through their creativity. It's something I do on a daily basis. And I have a lot of friends that I keep up with, and we love to talk to each other about our work and what we're up to. And as I was at SCAD, I really loved being a career advisor. It was great. I loved meeting everyone, and the illustration students were always like so excited to work on their stuff, and that's what gets me excited too. And then I also loved like collaborating with Sequa or game design or whatever happened to be what we were doing that day. But over time, I realized I was missing art. I really wanted to get back to it. And while I had grown so much as a career advisor, I knew I had some more growing to do as an actual practicing artist. So I decided to head back into the wild world of freelance. And here I am today. So some of the relevant parts of that story since I left SCAD are that I had to take some time to really figure out what I wanted. And that's what everyone listening is going to have to do too. Some of you might already know, like, hey, I want to go into Riot Games, or I want to go work at Blizzard, or enter whatever company you're into. But a lot of you probably kind of still don't know, or maybe you have some answer for like what I want to do, but you don't know why, or maybe you don't know what specific job you want to do. And I think it's really valuable to take some time to figure that out. And that might take some research. It might mean that you're going to have to learn what you don't know. It might mean that you reach out to people in the industry to learn some of that. And so I want to give you some of these art hacks that might help you speed up as you try to figure some of these questions out. And because the sooner you know what you want to do and what you need to do to get it, the more motivated you're going to be to accomplish that. And this entire game is really about that. It's about motivation, it's about momentum and keeping going. Because right now, as you're in classes, you have plenty of reason to keep moving because you have deadlines, you have professors there supporting you, as well as providing critique for your work. But whenever you finish school, you don't have that anymore. So you have to figure out, how do I keep creating a lot of work? Because that's the key. You got to make work while I'm kind of just doing my own thing, while I'm building and applying towards things. So some of these art hacks will hopefully help with that. So I'm just going to jump into those and then we'll be able to talk about them afterwards. So the first art hack that I have for you is to be action oriented. And what I mean by this is a lot of times we'll say to ourselves, oh, I've got to get this drawing done. But whenever you're doing that, you're not focusing on the action. You're focusing on the actual noun, the drawing. And maybe that doesn't keep you from drawing right now, but sometimes whenever you're on your own, that can get a little overwhelming because you start thinking like, oh, this has got to be professional quality. It's got to be like my best, or maybe it's got to be, something that I is perfect for the job I want to get. And you start to lose sight of what you really love about all of this, which is actually doing the drawing. So what I've found to be more helpful is when I wake up each day, I say, I'm going to draw today. Like that's going to happen. It's because drawing is what I do. I just happen to be working on this project. Maybe that project is something that's personal. Maybe it's something for a client. But the key is if I'm getting to draw that day, that's a win. And so that really flips it on its head and keeps it from becoming a stressful thing. So if you ever feel intimidated by a project you have to work on, maybe it includes something that you're not particularly comfortable in, like some sort of advanced perspective or something like that. Or maybe it's just like it's a big grade and you've got a lot going on. Or maybe it's for a client and you're getting paid for it. Or you're planning to send this to Blizzard, your dream company. That's where just saying, I am drawing today can really help because you're just going to do it either way. And the more you do it, the better the work gets and the more likely it is to be your best. A connecting point to this is something I heard Carla Ortiz say. Carla is a concept artist who's worked on movies. She's also done illustration for Magic the Gathering and different books. And she said when she first started working at ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, she just went in, she went ham. She was going as hard as she could. And her art director came up to her and was like, hey, Carla, I appreciate, that you're trying so hard, but could you maybe dial it back a little bit? And that goes against what you think you would expect people to say to you at a job. But she said, because I don't want you to be giving 100%. And then when we have to crunch or work harder, you have nothing left to give. Also, I don't want you to burn out. So maybe give like a consistent 65, 70% so that when we need you to buckle down, you can go harder. And I think that's a really important thing to learn your process, to know what does it look like for me to give 100% versus giving 60%. And usually 60% would be, I can do this every day, no problem. It's not like super out of my comfort zone. And I know I can deliver this without a sweat. That's really where you want to be at and still be delivering work that could help a team on a project. I say that instead of professional work because even the word professional can get nebulous as to what that means. But I think it's better if you can make sure you're drawing 5 hours a day and you feel good about that 5 hours than that you try to draw for 12 hours in a day, burn out, and don't want to draw for a week. It'd be better, even mathematically, for you to do 5 hours a day consistently and maybe take a day off. And that's really key as you're growing as an artist after school and moving towards applying for these jobs. While you're in school, you've kind of got three jobs right now, three gigs, and those are your classes. You might have another gig that's actually a paid gig or something, or maybe a side project. But just know that you have to learn how to minimize that time so that you have the ability to work on all of them. The final thing in this little be action oriented section is sometimes you'll wake up and you'll be like, I should draw today. Maybe you felt that way over the break. You're like, I should draw today. And then it doesn't happen. Instead of that, whenever you say that to yourself, just go ahead and grab a pencil and do a fun little sketch for like 5 minutes. Don't feel like you have to commit to doing the whole 5 hours just because you're saying I should draw today. Instead, go ahead and get started and you will probably keep going. So it's a little bit of a mental trick on yourself. And they say this with the gym too. They're like, if you really want to get into working out, just at least go to the gym for 5 minutes. You're allowed to leave after that 5 minute mark, but go to the gym. And what do you know? You stuck around for an hour and got a good workout in. So the same idea applies there. So hopefully this idea of being action oriented can help you in the future or even now if you're struggling to find some of that motivation to move forward. The second one is fill in the holes. Just a fact of this entire thing is you're probably going to have areas of your work that are not up to par when you graduate. It's going to happen. It happened to me, pretty much happened to everyone I know, except for maybe 1 to 2% of the people that graduated from SCAD. And I've seen people graduate undergrad, grad school, and as a career advisor. It's just there's going to be gaps in your knowledge and in your practice. And that's totally normal because it may not seem like it, but you're trying to catch up to people who have been doing this for a lot longer than you. You know, it's not about the 4 years that you've been spending. It's about the fact that you're also competing with people who have been doing this for 10. And that shouldn't be a scary thing. It should hopefully be a freeing thing where you give yourself a break and say, yep, I'm still going to have to grow after school. And that's okay. But then you can be strategic about it. Try to figure out, work with a mentor, work with somebody that you trust, your career advisor, and or even with your friends and be like, where do you think I need to level up some? Because you don't have to be good at everything. Sometimes we want to. Sometimes I want to be good at everything, but you don't have to, and you really don't need to get a job. But it's nice to have a general like expertise in like everything, just like to where you can be like, okay, if they needed me to do a quick sketch of a person, I'd be okay with that. Or if they needed me to help out with the environments a little, I could probably do that. But generally in concept art, from what I've understood in my research and from the friends that I've talked with and my own experience, you normally are given a specific role. They want you to focus on a specific problem they need solved so that the overall project can move forward. Maybe you're in charge of developing the background people, all the people that are not the main character. Maybe you do the costumes, maybe you do the architecture. There's a lot of different roles that they need to fill. And by separating it out, you can get more efficient at that. So it's good to have a specialization, but that doesn't mean you can be bad at certain parts. I would say try to get decent, but then and look for those holes. If you're just like, man, anatomy, still never really got it, then take some time, on a break or once you've graduated or something to really buckle down and make some great anatomy work. One person that I really like their process for this is Loish. I'm sure a lot of you know about Loish. She said that for her, she likes to do studies and then she will make a portfolio piece to show what she has learned. I think that's such a good philosophy for making a portfolio piece because you're not making it only to appeal to a company, but maybe you've identified like, okay, Riot Games has more stylized anatomy than I normally do. So start studying stylized anatomy and be like, okay, I want to make a finished character concept sheet showing off this new stylized anatomy that I've learned. And it is geared towards Riot, but it's also geared towards my growth and showing people how I've grown. And I think that's a really healthy way to approach a portfolio piece because you're getting something out of it, even if your target company doesn't look at it. And it's more about the positive gains as opposed to looking at it as where don't I stack up yet? So just trying to keep a healthy mental game there is really helpful. Another reality is you're probably going to have to replace a lot of the work that you made in school. Usually the work that you make in school is showing you what you like to do and what kind of things you need to make. And you might keep a couple of them. Maybe there will be some gems in there that really were ahead of their time. Maybe, you kind of, it was just lightning in a bottle, but it doesn't quite happen again. That's okay. You can keep that in there. But try to look at like, what do I really need to make and how does my work actually compare to the industry? All of it is just steps on your journey. So it's okay to let go of some of that old work. I've had to do it. I know a lot of other people who've had to do it, and my site is stronger for it. And I can even show that to y'all afterwards if you'd like to see it. So it's really important to be willing to trim. And it's such a balance though. Because you're like, I need a certain number of pieces, but it needs to be a certain level of quality. And it really does depend on what you're trying to get into. Different roles have different needs. So yeah, that's my kind of spiel on filling in the holes. The next thing is interesting, not finished. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the saying, finished, not perfect. It was first coined by Jake Parker, who did Inktober. He's the creator of Inktober, and that was the whole philosophy behind Inktober, which is you want to finish it every day, even if it's not perfect. And that is a great philosophy. Unfortunately, it didn't really help me a ton because I have a certain definition for what finished is. And finished in general is a very nebulous word, right? How do you know when something's finished? It's an age-old question. But also, you'll see professional work that's completely unfinished, and then you'll see amateur work, that's super well finished, but it just doesn't have that something about it that is as good as the pro work. And so for me, the idea of finished, not perfect didn't quite help my creative potential to unlock as well as it did for some people. For me, I preferred to look at it a different way. One of my friends was talking about how she likes to approach art. And she says, because I was sharing with her in one of our talks, that, I'm struggling to finish work. Like I'll start it, but finishing it is hard. She says, well, I like to just make sure that it's always interesting. Every step of the journey, I try to make it interesting. When I'm doing a thumbnail, it's interesting. When I'm doing like the beginning of the sketch, it's interesting. When I'm adding a little more rendering, it's interesting to me. And she's asking herself, what would be interesting in this? And I think that's a more helpful approach because especially for concept art, your work is never really the finished product. Your job is to generate interest. It's to generate excitement in the team to create what you're making. And is to explain to them how to make it or how it works. But no one wants to read a manual if they're not interested in the product. So if you can make sure that the work is interesting to you and interesting to others, you're already ahead. And people will be less critical of the quality of your work if it's interesting. If it isn't interesting, they might be caught up in like the technical side of it. But if you come up with a cool idea, usually that will carry a lot of weight. And I've seen examples where people may not have been as technically strong as another artist, but their ideas were better. Or maybe the way they drew it was interesting. And so there's a lot of power in that. So I have grown a lot and have found a lot of freedom in the idea of interesting, not finished. Because, at a certain point, I determine when the art's finished if I'm my own art director. And I can always keep working on a piece even after I've called it finished. So it's more important about like what's truly interesting here. And that might help you figure out what finished means to you. And then the idea of finished, not perfect is really helpful. But first you have to define, what does finished even mean to you or to your industry? And then you can move forward to figure out like, okay, now that I know what's interesting to me, here's how I can finish it. And then it doesn't have to be perfect, because we don't have time to make perfect work, unfortunately. And usually, if you're trying to make perfect work, a lot of times it slows you down in your growth. So absolutely have those projects that are your things that you spend months on and really love, but also have an approach that's quick, economical, and interesting to you. And that might help you as you're developing your work. The next little section that I want to talk about is finding your element. And I kind of like to think of this like Avatar: The Last Airbender, like, what's your element? But also it's kind of a play on words, and there's the elements of art and the principles of design. And I have found in my experience, being a friend of artists as well as advising artists, most people's work is driven by, 1 to 3 of those elements of art, be it line, shape, color, light, value, form. There's all these different elements. Try to figure out which ones kind of excite you the most. Of course, we all want to flex into all of them and master all the elements like the Avatar. But in reality, there's a couple that are probably your comfort zone, or maybe the thing that you just can't get enough of. And one great way to figure this out is to look back at your history of what you have consumed, be it on Instagram, Twitter, wherever you collect things. Maybe it's just a file on your computer. What do you collect? What kind of art really inspires you? And for me, that's light and shadow, 100%. I love tonal images that use light and shadow to create depth and to create movement. And so for me, that's really what I try to focus on in my work is, okay, I want to invest heavily there. I want most of my process to be driven by that process so that the other areas aren't going to get as much attention, but that's okay because my work doesn't rely on that. For instance, it's okay if my work has less color. I can put more color into it if I think the piece needs it, but it doesn't have to be there. And then I work way faster when color isn't a variable. Or maybe it's not really using lines. And for me, that's an interesting thing. Like, lines are a part of my process. Like, I use them to be precise, because if I just go straight in painting, it kind of looks like a mess sometimes. So lines do help me to tie it down, but they're not really my finished look. So I know that the lines don't have to be super nice. I'm going to paint over them anyway, so I don't spend too much time there. So as you learn what your elements are, that can help you to figure out like, okay, cool, I'm not really going to worry about this too much. And you might even be able to remove it altogether. Like if you do more of a flat, linear or shape-based kind of design that you see in animation, well, you don't even have to worry about certain things. Maybe you need to know how to paint a little in case you need to do that, but it's okay if it's not your main thing. So I think finding your element is a very helpful approach, and it really helps you to be more economical so that when you're called on to crank some stuff out, or maybe you're calling upon yourself to crank some stuff out, you'll actually enjoy it. And the joy is what motivates, and it's what keeps the fire going. And you got to have it, or you'll get tired and you'll start being like, oh man, this is not fun. Because I think a lot of us got into this to enjoy it. So you're the one who chooses how you draw. So you can figure out how you want to make it something that you like. Similar to this point, the next one is to find your expertise. So expertise is a little different, the way I define it at least, than your art. When you become a concept artist, it's not enough just to draw. You need to know about stuff. You need to know about something other than drawing, because our stories usually are not about how to make a drawing. The stories or games or whatever we work on are usually about life. So you need to be an expert in some subject outside of art the cool part about this is you probably already are an expert in something. Maybe you love fashion. Maybe you love travel. You know, maybe you have a very interesting experience of living in one country, but then going to school in another. So you understand what it's like. Thinking about what are the things that you're passionate about, be it relationships or a certain topic. What kind of things are you into? And do you really collect? For me, it's medieval costumes and technology. I love collecting this stuff. I have gigabytes of images on my computer. It's a problem. I can quit whenever I want, but I'm never going to quit. You know what I mean? And I love like understanding how things worked in the past because I am a very thorough person and I like to make my work feel grounded. And that's overflowed into my work. And I love making art that explores that. And it also ties into why I started liking some of it is I played games as a kid that were huge about crafting. Like I loved playing RuneScape and stuff, and I loved crafting all the time in it. And so now there's a part of me that's always like, oh, how does that really work? How do you really turn dirt into iron into a sword? You know? And so for me, that's what I'm an expert in now because I'm just a super nerd about it. And that's something I could bring to a team. It's not just my drawing skill, but also accurate costuming or accurate ideas that would relate to that. So, and I've seen other people, other alums do this really well. One of my friends, he's really engineer minded. And so he started working on weapons, doing weapon concepts, and they just have been getting better and better because that's how his brain works. He also works on other things, but it's more of an uphill battle to learn figures than it was for him to learn weapons. So we all have our strong point and lean into that because getting a really strong portfolio put together that's focused is super helpful. And you'll feel good about your work when you know that it's right. And because you're probably the most knowledgeable person of your friend group about that sort of thing. And then the final point I have for you is once you've been doing all of this to show and tell, and actually, this was already mentioned in the chat by Nala. Hey, Nala, that it's important to create a community around your work, some way to get feedback, to not be in your own little silo. And this is a really important thing because Tyler Jacobson put it best. He's a Magic the Gathering artist who's worked on all kinds of great stuff. He said, nobody makes their best work in a vacuum. And I think this is absolutely true because I've tried. And then the moment I started showing my work to my friends and getting their feedback, it got way better. There is an art to this, though. There is a strategy. You don't just want to ask anyone for feedback. I made that mistake at CTNX one year, and I asked about 30 different professionals for their feedback, and I got about 30 different opinions on what I should be doing. So there are different kinds of feedback you can get. One of them is, of course, that professional critical feedback. And that's going to come from someone, it should come from somebody who literally works at the type of job you want to do or the type of company you want to work at, because they're going to have accurate info. This is such a niche field. Every company is a little different. Even Riot is different than Blizzard. Like, even though their work has some similarities, the way that they work, the process they go through, different, totally different. So reach out to those experts. And a lot of my friends who have been doing this have been seeing a lot of strong results. They're getting great feedback, and people are super nice. Like, not everyone's going to answer, but the worst case scenario is you just don't hear back. Or maybe someone says, you don't have what it takes. And then they're just not being helpful. But there are going to be people out there who will write you paragraphs back about your work. You just got to find them. So, and you can find those people by messaging them on LinkedIn. That's one really successful strategy I've seen. You can also email them. You could also take a mentorship with them. A lot of alums that I've talked with, they did like a mentorship after they graduated from SCAD with someone who works in the industry they want to do. Though a lot of people offer these for not very much money, But then you get like about a couple weeks of hands-on time with this person looking at your work, their work skyrocketed. It really helped them a lot. So I think those are great. Also, conventions. We were talking about Lightbox before we got started here. Absolutely, go to those conventions. That's a great goal for your first, year after school. Try to replace all the work in your portfolio is one goal. Try to set up some sort of a learning mentorship with someone in your field. And then the third thing would be try to go to some convention, preferably a convention that your mentor is also going to, so you can meet them in person and solidify that contact. But and a Lightbox takes place in LA. Oh, y'all might be talking about something else. But yeah, so those are great goals for your first year, is try to just go ahead and churn out new work to replace the old work, go to a con and get a mentorship. Those are things I have seen work for people. And hopefully that will help you get moving. The other kind of feedback that you want to get is just supportive feedback. This is where you need friends who, when you talk to them about your work, you leave more excited about it than when you first started. And it's important to do both of these things, to show and to tell. Don't just tell people about your ideas before you do them. It's better to not tell people until you have a little bit of art to show them, because at least then you've made something. Because sometimes if you tell people too early, the cat's out of the bag, and then you're like, your brain is moving on to the next project that you want to do because you've already expressed it. So show your friends' work, but show it to people who support you, not people who you don't want only criticism. So I have some friends who pretty much only give me critical feedback, and I go to them when I want that. I have other friends who may not be experts in my field, but they understand me and they understand the kind of stories I want to make. And they're actually fans of that stuff. And so they'll be like, oh, that's really cool. I like this, or I like that. Or they might be like, what is it? And then I'm like, I know I failed completely, but those are really important people to have too. So absolutely, I agree. Have a Discord server, have some friends that you stay in touch with, and have, multiple outlets for it, because sometimes people are just busy and they don't respond. But part of your creative process might include getting feedback. So it's important to have a couple of different people around. Like I'll have like maybe 5 people and I'll just send them all what I'm working on. And at least one of them gets back to me, and that's helpful. I will probably get different feedback from many of them, but I know what to expect from each of them, so it doesn't throw me off too bad. So one of the other important parts about talking to people in the industry is, one of my buddies who is a concept artist was saying a lot of people could do his job, but not a lot of people know what his job is. So I think that's a really important reason to reach out to the industry, is you're going to really learn what you need to be making and why. Because when you're making stuff for projects, you're not having to think about that. You're being given a pre-made project and then you just do it. And that's perfect for getting your skills up. But once you get out of school, you have to also decide what you make and when it's due and all that. So talking with a professional and understanding, oh, we normally have 2 to 3 weeks to work on this illustration, will help you be like, oh, okay, I don't have to like destroy myself trying to get this done. Or them saying, no, we have to turn in, a background painting every 2 days. Then you're like, okay, I've got to speed up. So get that good information so that you know what's really necessary for your work. And I think those are some helpful tips that will hopefully keep you on target. And, maybe they're not going to be super useful now, but maybe they'll be useful later. And I would love to explain any of these, to talk through any of them if people have questions about it. These have just been what I've been learning in the last year, and have been helping me to consistently create work, even on the hard days, or even on days when I'm like, maybe you kind of are in a tailspin or not sure what your focus is, or maybe your focus just changed because you learned something about the industry. So when that happens, it's good to have these. So I'm going to have this slide up that just has all of the points, and feel free to take a screenshot to write them down. But also I'm going to leave it up so that if you have questions, this might jog your memory about what you were curious about. And yeah, Ethan, we can just open it up now to chat, or Tessa, or whoever's moderating it.
Yeah.
And yeah. Mhm. Yeah. 100%. And Tim is such a great person. I'm glad to hear you got some time with him.
Wow. Steven, this has been an awesome talk. I don't know about everyone else. This is like exactly what I needed to hear right now with my little studio thing. Anyone who wants questions, wants to ask questions, they can just type them in the voice text because we do have like close to 20 people here. So several people are typing.
Yeah, I'm looking back through the other stuff to make sure I didn't miss anything.
I wrote some questions before and you like hit all of them like on the dot. I have
Yes.
I have like paragraph questions and like you even hit like the little semi bullet points and all right.
Right, 100%. That's totally normal to not know what you want to ask. And if it comes up later, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on this Discord and I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, I actually do have one that I think you did miss.
Oh, dang.
You skid by it. So
listen, it's okay to not be 100%. It's okay.
Yeah, put in your 60%.
That's right.
I actually heard Carla Ortiz say that at her Lightbox talk, which is funny.
It was a great talk, by the way. Very good.
Yeah, it was amazing. The talk with her and Ian McKegg, the tea roundtable, was like legendary.
Yeah.
So my question, you were talking a lot about like making your portfolio for companies and like finding kind of your niche and your element. And I think that right now there's a lot of like, I feel companies pulling you in different directions. I feel like a lot of students don't want to put all their eggs in one basket and be like, I'm going to work at Riot and like put all my effort into working at Riot. And then it kind of falls through. It's scary. So how would you suggest maintaining like your own stylistic voice while also still trying to be hireable? I think that's definitely a struggle for students right now.
Yeah, so trying to keep your artistic voice while still being relevant to companies and not going too broad. Okay, so generally the way I would look at it is there's going to be a lot of companies that you can kind of group. And so maybe Riot is your end goal, but try to ask like, what are the pillars of what Riot's art is? Why does it work? And why do people like it? And what other companies do that too? And try to come up with a sort of a basket of AAA, indie, all the different levels of studios. Look for that. And then make art that would appeal to all of those companies, right? Because although each of them has a unique process, they understand that you can't just always make art just for them. And also, they probably don't just want that. They probably want to see your voice. That's something that in the Disney talks they would talk about a lot, which is they really want to know what you bring to the table. And I'm not talking about like being the best artist ever, but like your genuine lived experience. And you're seeing that more in some of the movies they're making now that have a little more cultural variety in them, like Encanto or things like that. So they want to see your view of the world. And when it comes to gaming, sometimes they're like, what do you think the game needs, or what kind of thing would be fun? So that's where I think knowing generally how, like, where these companies fall into, like what baskets they fall in, will help with that. It is tough to balance that. And it's going to be tougher for some people than others. Like But in general, I think you can separate it out. The quickest separation is, okay, am I a photoreal artist, like AAA Call of Duty, or am I more of a stylized artist, like a Riot or a Blizzard, or even something more cartoony than that, or like Fortnite, something like that. And then if you make something targeted towards those, then start to ask, okay, what sort of subjects do they need? For instance, like some games really need a lot of like props made. If you think of it, like armor and weapons is a huge need in a lot of MMOs. Skins is a huge need in things like Fortnite. Um, Whereas they don't really need as much environment work in some of those. WoW still needs a lot of environments, but you get the idea. So that's one way, is to try and maybe make a list of like what are the most important things for your target companies, and make sure you hit the top three in those. It's okay if you only have one example of something that's lower on the list. And then also learning about the specific roles can help a lot, because you might be more stylistically broad, but you really love environments. Maybe you're just a really big environment person. That's okay too. There are different ways it can be grouped together. So that's what I would say, is try to always bring something of yourself to every project, but also try to look for what's a good average of these different companies.
That's awesome. Yeah, like doing a lot of research and a lot of almost self-analyzing with what you were talking about, finding your own element and trying to mix it in with what you believe like they need from you, what they would want.
And get the correct information too. Talk to someone who actually works there.
Oh yeah, true.
Like one of my friends was getting different advice on what he should do, and then one person from the company was like, "Oh no, we have an entire team of people who all they do is make weapons." Like that's it. So
we don't need your weapon designs.
Well, no. What they meant is there's always a need for that, and so like if you just do weapons, there's a place for that. Is the idea. So yeah, it's more about like, think of it like, I know not a ton of people at SCAD are super athletic, but think of it like a sports team. You need someone to fill every position, but not every position is the same. And some people may flex, and others may be really specialized. One other quick tip about this, and kind of the direction I'm going in, is, getting into full-time gigs is a big commitment on the company's part. But freelancing for them is a little bit less of a commitment, because they're giving you a chance to help out with something. But it's not like they've, flown you all the way over there and you're buying a house and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a useful thing, and not just freelancing for the actual company Riot or whatever, but look at who outsources for Riot. Riot works with other companies to finish their stuff. So freelance with those companies, the satellite companies, and that's a great way to get some experience.
Yeah, we actually had an artist, I think, from one of those companies come here like last year. I think it's Wild Blue Studios, maybe.
Yeah, Wild Blue's a great one.
Wild Blue, 6-4 vodka too.
Yep, exactly. So that's one other helpful way, but it's going to be a moving target. That's the true answer. Is your portfolio is always morphing, and that's where trying to, again, keep it interesting, not finished, can be helpful from a macro view, because then you're not going to be like, why isn't my portfolio ever done? The reality is it's never going to be done. You just need it to be the right mix. It's like, think of it like Hearthstone or something. You need the right cards in your hand for that play. That's all, right?
Yeah.
You're always going to be drawing new cards, and you're always going to be discarding, but just have the right cards in your hand for what you're applying for.
That's awesome. Well, we have a lot of questions now.
Yeah, pick one for me and feel free to ask.
So right at the top, we have Martin. He does a lot of environment design here. He said that he's really interested in environment design, but he's not as proficient at digital painting. And he said, should I just make a black and white portfolio? Which I've seen his work. He does a lot of great like line art and a lot of great designs, like flat view designs into perspective. So I'm wondering if he's just asking, not digitally painting anything, more of a design focused portfolio.
Sure. Yeah. And feel free to clarify on this, Martin, as I'm answering. But So there are great roles that only do line art, like in animation specifically, being a background designer, you literally don't do the color at
Yeah.
all. So that could be a great spot to start.
Martin
Is
just said goal, goal, goal.
yeah, look at some of I'm blanking on his name. Hang on just a second. It's the YouTuber who talks. He has his microphone on a
Ethan
knife.
Becker.
Ethan Becker, yeah, he's got some great videos on that kind of stuff. Yeah, Ethan, check that out. And yeah, I agree, Nala. The SCAD animation studio films would be great for that, for Martin. But there is a role for people who primarily do line art. I think another great thing to consider with environments is how can you use 3D to speed that up? You know, so maybe you do flat perspective really well, but then you could grab a quick Blender model and then draw on top of it to get your line art for a perspective view. And then you flip it around and do the other side. So you're able to go faster and use your strong point, which is your line work. And then maybe your painting style, quote unquote, is just flat colors with one shadow, you know? And maybe you don't use a lot of different colors of light sources. Maybe you have different local colors, like, okay, this is orange, that's blue, but it's all being lit by the same color. Like maybe look into more of a cell shading kind of technique. That should be fine, you know, depending on what you want to do.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And Blender is such an easy thing to learn. And literally, you can just box model. Like the good thing about it is then at least your proportions are locked in. And by box modeling, I mean, you literally just make a box and that's going to be your temple or your house or whatever. And then you can move it around and at least your proportions are the same. You don't have to actually get super good at modeling. Although, honestly, it's not too hard. I learned it in about a month to where I felt like I could put it in my process. And that's been very liberating for me. But your knowledge, right? You don't have to know 3D. And 3D can hold you back if you're too reliant on it, but it is a great tool.
It is a great tool. I'm actually, some people are mentioning SCAD Animation Studios. I'm working at SCAD Animation Studios this quarter, and the people that know how to use 3D really well, even just having a base knowledge of how your work will be translated into 3D is really helpful. It's like a learning curve I've had to get over, a rough learning curve, where some people who are in like games and animation work with 3D a lot more closely and they know this design needs to be expressed this way or turned around this way. And it's just a helpful thing. It'll only be a tool in your tool set.
Yeah. It's like to maybe translate it a little. Imagine that you could know with one click that all of your lines of perspective would be correct. Like, that's really nice sometimes
It
when
is
you're
nice.
in a rush or when you're like, I need to draw this building from 4 different angles. Oh, cool. That saved me a ton of time. Even just having the basics there, the primitive forms. So,
For sure.
what else
Okay,
we got?
we have another question. We have a question from Nala. I missed the first part, but I'm wondering what you think about continuing education post school. Like, did you consider taking additional master classes? How do you decide if a particular class is worth it?
Or
Or
grad
grad
school?
school?
Yeah. Great question. And we might have even talked about this, Nala, but it's always a good discussion. I think the big question is, you know, how much is it going to cost you? And how accurate is the information to your next goal, right? I think grad school is most useful if you want to go into education, my personal opinion, because it's a kind of a requirement to have that degree. Information is so plentiful right now that, like, when I was first going to SCAD, there were not, schoolism didn't exist, like Gumroad didn't exist, like all these things, Patreon didn't exist, YouTube was barely there. So I think it's at a point now where ask, would the, for like a master class or something like that, would the relationship with the instructor help me in some way, or would their specific knowledge help me in some way, or, you know, would the work I'm going to generate or maybe the classmates I meet, would that be worth it? It's really trying to get as much info as you can to know that. um, and honestly, it also could just be like, are you curious about it? Are you interested? I went to a classical academy that did not get me any closer the entertainment art, but I really love classical art, and it's actually a kind of important for my specialty because I love medieval stuff, and those things kind of relate. So those are kinds of things that I would ask myself. The degree is, I think, generally a bachelor's is enough in the commercial art industry. Like people don't expect more than that, at least. So that's kind of where I'm at on it. I am glad I went to grad school, especially because I then worked in higher ed and it taught me a lot. But I don't think it's for everyone.
Nice. So Joy has asked, is there any chance would you be open to briefly looking through my website or portfolio? We talked about doing little portfolio reviews last time. Would you actually still want to do that today, or would you prefer people send it
Yeah,
privately?
I don't mind looking at someone's if they're open to it being like a public thing to share information with people. If you want it to be private, just reach out to me afterwards. That's how I would probably do that. And then we can take a look at it and do some one-on-one. And even if I do it public now, we could still talk about it more in depth one-on-one too, because there is a difference between talking to 20 people about someone's portfolio and
For
talking to
sure.
the individual. So
Yeah, for sure. But yeah.
but I'm open to that, Joy. Feel free to reach out to me. And if you're
So
open to public, like let us know and we could consider it.
yeah, that too. After questions are over, people want to stick around. I know Amelia did that 2 quarters ago when she came back. She did like one or two people, and it was like really informative.
Yeah, yeah. Be happy to
Okay,
do that.
so Ellen asks, "What all does a mentorship entail?" So, what do you think a mentorship should entail?
I mean, that's going to vary based on what the artist is offering, but in general, hopefully individual time with them where they're actually giving you like feedback. If I were offering one, I would also want to include like a moment where if it's truly a mentorship, not just a class, right? But if it was a mentorship, I would want it to be something where I was sitting down with them to find out what is your goal, individually, that person, that student, so that I can make sure that what I'm offering them is helpful. And some of the artists who have been brought up in this, I know they're like that. Like they'll talk to the person. They're almost like it's like a individual coach, at the gym that helps you work out. So, but really, it should include hopefully at least one finished project at the end that shows what you learned. I think that's really critical. And they should be able to give you like really informed feedback because they're in the role that you want to move towards.
So,
Please.
yeah.
Mhm. Great point. Yeah, I've had a
For sure.
mentor for years who I just met him at a SCAD class one time. He was a visiting professor and we've been just friends. We just call each other every couple months. We're just like, "Hey, how's it going?" But his support and his just friendship has been so helpful to me, especially during times where I didn't know what I was going to do. Just knowing that someone's out there kind of rooting for you is also really great. So 100% great point, Tessa.
Yeah. So we have a small question. What are some of the other outsource companies Riot Games hire? I actually don't know. Do you happen
Yeah,
to know?
I don't have like a list. I think I did have a list when I was a career advisor, but I don't know if I have that list anymore. But it was just a list that I found by literally going on ArtStation and just typing in like, League of Legends stuff or Runeterra or whatever, and noticing like, oh, this is not Riot. They are, but they're working with Riot. And another great way is like to look in the credits of things. For instance, like Arcane was made by a different studio.
Yeah.
So just like take some time to, be researching that and look up, as you find cool artists on Instagram or wherever you're at, like notice like where have they worked and do a little detective work and build your own list. There might be a list on the internet. I don't have one though.
I don't think there's a list. What's up?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Runeterra and Runeterra and TFT outsource like a lot of their art. I know
Mm-hmm.
that for sure. Like a lot of the TFT maps and a lot of the Runeterra cards are almost all outsourced.
Yeah, that's what I would do is I would be hunting down that stuff, and it's good to know like certain projects tend to be outsourced more than others.
Yeah.
They've got their flagship, but then they got their other smaller IPs that they want to keep just fed at the moment.
So we have a great question from Nushi. How is a good way to tell if my portfolio is ready to share with others in the field and get feedback on? I can see my work getting better, but it never feels ready to
Mm.
show to anyone.
Yeah, that's a tough thing to feel. The best way to find out is to show it. And if they're able to give you really clear feedback, not just like you need to work on perspective, right? Or if they're not giving you super general stuff, your work's probably getting close to being ready to show them. Um, Also, just like take their art, the art of people you want to work with, and put it in the same file, folder, or Photoshop file as your work, and do an exercise of comparison and get really picky about it. Maybe even do it with some friends or, an advisor or something like that. But like professor, someone you trust, and like dig into like, okay, their edge quality is just at a different level than mine. Like, okay, cool. That's one area. But my colors look really similar to theirs. So my colors are good. And then you can start getting a little analytical about it. I know not everyone is wired that way, but if you can take some time just to compare those really side by side, that's probably going to be the best way. A really easy way to get into that is by going to an event where you're able to organically talk to people and show them your stuff, which I also know not everyone is wired to do. But that's where then you can kind of soft sell it to people. Be like, yeah, would you mind looking at my work real quick? And they might be like, oh, this is cool, or something like that. And or they might be like, so here you need to really work on this and you'll work on that. And they're going to give you targeted things to work on. A great way to do that while you're at SCAD is when employers come visiting to apply for those visits.
Career fair.
Career fair is a great one. Some are give you more bang for your buck, right? Like be strategic. At career fair, you may have to wait 2 hours in a line, right? And I don't know how they're doing it now. It may be way more efficient, but at times there were long lines, right? So that's one investment. Or you could have to make sure that you're paying attention to the job board and applying to those, which could also take time. So kind of figure out what kind of an interaction you want and where you want to invest your time at. And that can help. The art director's day and things like that are great because they're a little more targeted towards your interests. Sometimes visiting companies are mostly recruiters. Sometimes they're art directors. It's hard to know who's going to be there. So that's where just staying in touch with it. I would just always try to go to what presentations interest you. And then if you need to, just reach out to them afterwards. But ultimately, I think we all have a level of discernment and taste. Now, it's weird. You always think you're worse than you are, and you always think you're better than you are at the same time. It's really odd as an artist. You're like, surely I'm not that far away from working, but then you're also like, my work is terrible. I'm never happy with it. Like, it's this weird, polarized
The
existence.
battle.
Yeah.
Can I also
But
hop on this one? Sorry, I'll
yeah,
let you
yeah.
finish your thought.
Yeah, just the last thing I was going to say is it's just important to get that feedback from other people because other people are going to start saying, this is the key. This is the key phrase. Ooh, that looks like insert story, insert company name, insert something. When you start hearing that a lot, you're real close.
Yeah.
So also for like example, talking to people in like say you're at a convention, right? You can also observe, artists, talking to people, and you can hit stalls where there's only like one person. Especially if you're an introvert, it's very helpful just to single out the single person. Also, if it's an artist and they might be busy but they're selling stuff, now this might be a really good way to get on someone's bad list. But Mike Uwandi, who's also was in Bobby Chu's webinar, he mentioned that he walked up to an artist who was selling books that I guess he had something to do with. And he walked up and he said, if I buy this, like 2 or 3 copies of this book from you, can I get a portfolio review? And in that case, the artist said yes. So also like maybe learn how to schmooze a little bit because schmoozing is a big network thing.
I have a little story on this. A week ago, an artist, Robin Leora, I think her name is, came back to SCAD in one of Arden's pro portfolio classes, and she said that she got a huge gig because on one art director's day or career fair day, it might have been, she couldn't get like a scheduled time with this art director. She waited till the end of the day after closing hours and kind of snuck into his room as he was packing up his stuff and was like, "Hey, like, can you look at my work?" And I know that sounds like that sounds terrifying, like especially to me. Like I would be so awkward and like sweating and freaking out. But he saw her work. She sent it to him later. She didn't have to look at it then. He remembered her and then considered her for a job, and then she got a job off of it like a couple months later. Like sometimes that happens. Mm-hmm. You just have to be a little unabashed sometimes. And schmooze.
Yeah. I think a good middle road for like the whole, like if they're selling stuff thing is like just buy something to buy it and casually lead the conversation to like how their work inspires you a lot. And then would they be willing to take a quick look? And they'll probably be open to it. Like you could make it more explicit, or you could make it more like, subtle. So everyone has their way that they're comfortable with. Some people can say something like that where they're like, if I buy 3 books, will you give me a review? And the way they say it is not aggressive at all, but it's also really assertive. It's a skill. It's absolutely a skill.
Yeah. So next question, to piggyback off that, I get a little nervous to show my work in professional settings sometimes. Is there anything you used to do when you were just starting out to encourage yourself? From Kirsten.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things. So one of them is that, everyone puts on their pants the same way. Like they're just a person too. And there is a chance they might be rough. They might be really critical or blunt. But a lot of my experiences have since, lately at least, most people are really, really nice. So whenever it comes to that, just know that this is an opportunity for you to learn something. Even if it's a hard talk, you're still going to learn something from it. You may not learn something from that person, but you may learn something from like your friends when you talk to them about working with that person. I've gotten bad advice before, but you still learn something from bad advice, even if it's just that was bad advice. But when it comes to nervousness, my intent is always, I want to be understood. Like I want to make sure this is really clear to them, and I want to be respectful of their time. So I kind of get to the point, but I try to speak in a way that makes sure they understand me. So if me being nervous is getting in the way of that, then I have to stop being nervous so they do understand me. That's what's most important there. Not what they think of me. It's more important, like what they understand of what I'm trying to say. So focusing on the clarity of the message has always helped me to, in a moment, speak in public, whether that's to one person or to 100 people, because I just focus on the message. And that can really help you in those moments where you're not sure what to do. And ultimately, you're going to speak to really important people sometimes. You're going to speak to people who don't have as powerful of positions, is the way I'll phrase that. And it's all the same. We're all just people. So I think it's important to just pull it down. I never suffered from getting stunned by, what's the word for it when you see someone come in that you really like and you just can't speak? Yeah, starstruck. Thank you. I never really suffered from that. I don't know why, but I know it's a real thing. But
Oh
just
yeah.
remember that they're just like I think Ethan said, they just happen to have jobs. That's the only difference between them and you, is that
We
they've
all
had
have the same
opportunities.
breakfast in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. They probably had continental breakfast that morning at a hotel. Maybe that'll make you feel better about talking to them. I don't know,
Yep.
but in a lot of cases, they've just had more time, more opportunities to try, and usually I'll tell you a story that might help with this. I was an undergrad and a guy came to SCAD and was talking about working on VFX stuff and anatomy stuff. And I really respect his work. I was listening to his presentation a lot. And, you know, the next day there was an art event where he was doing a market. And so I went up to his booth. He goes, "I remember you from my talk. Do you have a portfolio I can see?" I was like, "Actually, I just started here at school. I don't have a portfolio." And he's like, "Well, I like your guts or your attitude." I had not said hardly anything, right? I had just introduced myself, but just my intent, that earnest intent, really does come through. And so he gave me his email and stuff, and I didn't even ask for it. So people recognize when you're trying to be sincere and genuine, and I think part of it is just being willing to get hurt. Whenever you're nervous, you just have to know that if something bad happens, you will be okay and you will move on. And you just gotta kind of get used to it by jumping in the water. It's uncomfortable, absolutely uncomfortable. But the more you do it, the more you're gonna find confidence that, oh, I can do this. And yeah, wow, I really screwed that one up. But then you know that there will be 20 more after it that you'll do great. So try to keep a broad view and just keep trying.
Yes.
Yeah, please.
So a lot of the time, they are people, but like if you're going after someone who's like an art director, a lot of the time they will say no, but also try and remember that consistency is key. So if, say, you send them 2 emails, they may not respond. Maybe on the third email, they'll go, "Oh, this person keeps emailing me. Maybe I should like see what they're about." So consistency can definitely be your friend in some situations. And I had a thought, and it totally zooped out of my brain. Oh, and
Yeah.
also learning to just have a healthy relationship with accepting no as an answer. Like the DreamWorks presentation that I was at a few days ago, the lady, she started as a desk assistant and she literally got her foot in the door by consistently asking people, "Can I help you with this? Can I get you a sandwich? Do you need water? Do you need me to carry anything?" And then finally someone said yes, and she ended up being the sandwich person and then just went up the rungs from there. So being consistent and also just kind of being like, not like aggressively assertive, but like realizing you're a person and you have a right also, just to kind of like, I don't know, there's that. And then also it came back to me, if you have a hard time showing your stuff to professionals because you froth at the mouth and the thought of showing it to a professional makes you actively want to pass out, been there, done that. Start with friends. Our peer groups are people we see on a daily basis. They're probably closer to us in the sense that we see them every day and talk with them every day. So that's a really good way to kind of start building those networking muscles, is by saying, "Hey, you and I both like figures. Would you like to like crit my figure work?" Or like, "Hey, I also like weird furries. Let's go to lunch or something and talk about it." So it's just finding like those little itty bitty ins that can lead to engagement that may build into something else down the line.
100%. Another little note on that is not like I'm in no way saying this in like a mean way, but definitely improving your ability to communicate your art and accepting no and accepting like a lot of critique is going to be really, really crucial, because sometimes if you're really struggling to approach people, like I've definitely been a hand of this, really struggling to approach people and get critique from professionals. When you're at a job that's all that you end up doing, like you are showing your work on a big screen in front of a lot of people and having to pitch these ideas, and it'll be just as intimidating then as it is now before having a job. So it's a skill that everyone needs to work on, and it's not going to go away once we get those jobs.
And it's not always going to be a home run even after you're professional. I recently had a situation where I sent my work and they were like, this is completely not what I was looking for, and then you have to calmly try to work through it. And sometimes it doesn't work out. That's okay too. But I'm fine now, and just knowing that. And I agree with Ethan, like as many opportunities as you can, like just always take them, jump in there, don't be like a dad showing off pictures of their kids kind of level, but, or, hey, look at my cat. But, or show people pictures of your cat. That can be a valid strategy in some cases. But I think it's really important
Giving Tim
to
Kaminsky
try.
recipes.
Right? Yeah. Everyone has their weakness. Wow.
They're besties.
Yeah, hopefully that helps though. It's definitely a skill you have to work on, and the more you do it, the better you get, just like with any other soft skill.
Yeah. We had to pitch our SCAD Animation Studios project this week, and about half of the story got cut.
Mm-hmm.
It happens. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means you need to keep working till it's right.
Yeah, it wasn't wrong. It just wasn't the answer.
Right. Exactly.
And actually, those classes, the structure of them is great because you have to pitch. And I was in one of them, and I was the lead on on the environments, and I would encourage other people in the group to pitch as well, so that they got an opportunity to, because pitching in front of about 20 to 30 people is a really great skill to build. And then it becomes way easier to talk to one person about your work after you've done it to 20 to 30.
After you've done that, like walking up for a portfolio review is like, well, it's just one dude.
Yeah, Nal is pointing out that they have to turn down a lot of really talented artists just because they're not in the right niche. And it's more about, does it solve the problem, not is it good?
It was mentioned that like back to like the passion thing, if you're really passionate about stuff, it'll finally pull through for you. And also my brain is not working today. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
You're hopping back and forth so much. Your brain's scrambled. That is a really great distinction. We need to write that down and put it on a wall.
Well, and it's easy if you think about it in your own process, right? Like you make up a bunch of thumbnail ideas and you indiscriminately go like, no, 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 I don't like those, and it
They're
doesn't
not
mean
bad
that.
thumbnails most of the
Yeah,
time. That
right.
isn't the right thing you were thinking of. That isn't exactly what you were thinking of yet.
Oh, it came back. Okay. So just because you have killer skills, if you are an absolute arse, you won't get hired.
True.
Because you could have the best killer skills, but like if you're not able to connect and work in a team, that will leave you dead in the water faster than you can imagine.
Yeah, 100%. And even
Yeah.
more, especially now when there are so many artists. like the community of artists have grown. So there's always a lot of people applying for the most part. And in some cases, if people feel like too much of a rock star, they might get looked over for someone who may still need to grow a little bit. And the people at Wild Blue Studio were talking about this. They'd rather work with someone who's decent but fun to work with than someone who's amazing but a jerk.
Oh yeah. That's a great thought. Also, I know we're all taking classes and we're all doing our portfolio projects like kind of most of the time on our own. Like it's pretty illustration is a very individual department at SCAD, and when we get into the industry, it totally flips, and all of a sudden we're like throwing work at other people and getting critique like every minute of every day, and it's going to be challenging if you're not like if you're a bad person and B if you struggle getting critique and if you struggle working with people. Oh, Kirsten, I think we just got on a train. We totally answered your question. We didn't like, misread it. I promise.
Yeah,
I think we just got on a ramble train.
We're just riffing at this point.
Yeah. Well, if anyone has any more questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah, there is one thing that I do to hype myself up, and this won't apply to everyone, but for me it does. I'm a faith-based person, and so I pray, and so I just tell myself like I speak to the creator of the universe every day. I can talk to a person, right? So that won't work for everyone, but that's one thing I do to hype myself up.
Yeah. Nala, yeah, we definitely have less people that we can unmute you, Nala. You should be good.
Hello.
Hey, what's up, Nala?
Hello. Hi. I'm so sorry. I as soon as I unmuted, I sound like I'm dying. I'm getting over COVID, which sucks. Do not recommend.
Yeah. Get better.
Thank you. It was rough. I had just gotten this art director job, and then I got sick.
Oof. Big oof.
But I'm on the mend. We are feeling better, so that's good. I definitely sound a lot worse than I feel because I feel basically better. Just coughing attacks, not fun. Anyways, regarding confidence, I feel like it's talking to people can be really scary. But there's many different ways to reach out to people. If you're not, if you get anxious about messaging people, sometimes you can talk to people in public spaces. So, for example, on Twitter, you can talk to them in their comment section. You can like comment on their stuff on Instagram. Like, I don't know about y'all, but like there's a couple people who follow my Twitter who always retweet like literally everything I post. And I've never talked to these people, but I definitely noticed their presence. And so like if one of these people were to I'm so sorry, eventually message me or comment or something, like I would recognize them and I'd be more willing to talk to them than if they were just like a random person who I've never seen before. So you definitely can make friends that way by just interacting with them on social media. In the public sphere, if you get anxious about sending a private message. On the other on the other side, like when I went to PAX this winter, I was saying in the voice chat, I got invited to panel, which was a huge thing. I was very, very excited for that. On the days that, or on when I wasn't paneling, I spent like one of the days walking up and down in the dealers hall, because lots of game companies. This convention is specifically for tabletop games, so it was like board games, card games, and tabletop RPGs. I literally walked up and down the aisles talking to every single company, asking them, do you hire? I had my business cards ready, and I would ask for like their art directors. So I got to talk to a lot of people just by um, like being there and being a little brave to ask the question, because sometimes the booths don't have like any members of the creative team there, but just by asking, they were able to pass my information along. And so I was able to like get emails from, for example, like the art director at Paizo, who makes Pathfinder. Um, that because those people weren't there, but the people who were manning the booth offered to pass my information along, which is nice and really cool. But I feel like also like I think Stephen was mentioning it earlier, like people who work in the industry are just artists. Like like we're all normal people. So I like if it helps at all, like try not to be scared to talk to people, because every single time I've reached out to people on social media or talked to them in person, people have been really, really nice. And the people that haven't been nice, I just kind of disregard their opinion. You know what I mean? Like you want to be nice. Um, if that helps at all. I'm sorry, that was a bit of a ramble fest, but yeah.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
Can I trade
but
Yeah.
off of that?
yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
So, also like kind of like nudge, like if you know who they are and you know their socials, a good way to kind of like maybe get a foot in the door, maybe even if you haven't talked to them or they haven't had a panel where you could be like, "Oh, hi. I was at this panel. Thank you for talking," that kind of thing. You can also just consistently message on their Instagram posts and like their stories, because they will notice if you consistently interact with them on platforms they use. I don't know if that helps at all.
It does, yeah. I think it also helps to, have your work easily findable whenever you do message someone,
Oh my
Yes,
or
god.
have
have
it
it
ready.
everywhere.
I can tell you stories.
Yeah, like have it
Everywhere.
if you email someone, have your URL and your signature. If you DM them on Instagram, make sure it's your art Instagram, not your dog's Instagram. Like little things to make it easy for them to see that, oh, you do art too. That's cool.
A little note on the emailing thing that you actually just made me remember. I heard pretty recently, and I actually found it to be true. Like I tested it out, that if you email like an art director or some type of artist that you really like are inspired by and you're seeking advice, like especially in email, having like images attached instead of just a cold link is like 100% better. Like people, if they open the email and scan it really quick, and sometimes they see that they have to open up another link, you'll get people that just won't. But if you just have the images there attached, stuff that you can easily show, they'll immediately snap onto it and it works.
I recommend
Well,
making something like this. Hang on. Let me post it. It's a collage of my work with my name and my website
oh,
on it.
nice.
Yeah,
And so I
that's
use this
perfect.
on social media. If I'm talking about my work, I can just post this. And like, this is kind of outdated. I need to update this. That's been on my to-do list for a while. But making something like this, and you can attach this in like your email signature if you want, or you can attach it to emails, or when you tweet on Twitter on your work, you can do this because like Twitter, for example, only lets you attach 4 images to a thing. So by doing one collage, that's 16 by 9 ratio, in my opinion, that's nicer to look at than
Yeah,
like 4 separate images, because Twitter will crop them weird, and you know what I mean. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
That's a great idea.
Well, thank you, Steven, so much.
Yeah, of course. It's
Did you want to go over a portfolio or two, maybe? Do you have time?
um yeah, if anyone is open to that, like doing a more public one, feel free to put your links in the chat if you want me to just take a quick look, and we'll do them, kind of first come, first serve, I guess, and hit a couple. No worries, Martin. See ya, Andy. Thanks for coming.
Let's go, Joy.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Joy's work is amazing.
I always love reviewing portfolios that are amazing.
They're the best.
All right, let me pull this up. The Wix site. All right.
Oh, I can unmute. I'll mute people. Yes. Just a warning, you're going to be unmuted.
Yeah, so, turn off any other videos you were listening to
I'm sure no
while
one
I was speaking.
You were speaking like a lightbox panel, Steven. No one would.
Oh, that's kind. Thank you. Well, this is cool. So homepage, and then you've got your different sections. I like to just sort of go through it quickly, and then I'll zero in on stuff. But it is useful to see how quickly people go through your site. You had specific little things here too. Okay, some process. Nice. Because art directors don't have a lot of time, so they might not even click into these little areas. If they're looking at 50 people and they've got to make a decision in a couple hours, if that.
Yeah, I'm gonna be real honest with y'all. I had like 300 applications to look through. And it averaged about like 3 minutes per person, which does not sound like a lot. Partially a
300
lot.
people. 300
Yeah,
people. Oh my God.
it took me a really long time.
Even
Yeah.
at 3 minutes.
I've been looking at portfolios during this meeting because I need to make a decision, and I am on round 2 right now, and it's really hard to narrow it down now that I'm on my finalists. It's
Yeah.
so hard to choose people.
Because you only get so many interviews or whatever.
Yeah, like I need to hire 2 people immediately, and then I get to hire like 5 to 7 more later. But I have like 30 finalists that I have to somehow narrow down.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm just
Joy, did you apply to the thing? I recognize your stuff. You did. Yeah. I like your colors a lot.
I agree. I think color is definitely something that your work stands on. Like, for instance, this piece is primarily driven by the color. And, if this was in black and white, I don't think it would be quite as interesting. Like the colors really make it pop. So I think that's a great takeaway, first and foremost. I'm also interested in so this work doesn't have any lines in it, really. It's mostly like shape tonal based, but then these have lines in it, and I think you could definitely get this up to the level of your linear work. But at the moment, for me, your linear work stands off the page more powerfully. And that might just be you figuring out, I think this head is a really good example of your work standing off the page nicely for your tonal work. But I think it's more difficult, it seems. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that, Joy. And Nala, if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, like for me specifically, I'm looking for a really niche style because there's a lot of really talented people whose work just doesn't fit. And so for me, I noticed your work has beautiful line art, and I really, really like that because I'm specifically hiring character artists. Your style is really, really nice. I agree with what Steven said. I think your lined pieces are stronger than your lineless ones. And I noticed your colors are really strong as well. And I like your environments. I think I made a note on your thing that your environments are really good. So if I ever need an environment artist, I'll definitely recommend you.
Yeah, I agree on all that. And that doesn't mean the other things aren't, progressing nicely. It's just, this is just what's standing out to us right now. So hopefully that gives you a read on if you want to invest more in one or the other. It might also be useful to consolidate your portfolio in a way that shows off that. So, like, if you had just one piece after another that was just jumping off the page, someone's way more likely to take a risk on you. Whereas if you have another one that might be pulling it down, then that's going to make them hesitate.
I also
So,
think.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Did I cut you off?
No, you're good.
I am in your. I think this is the illustration tab. Yes, I'm in your illustration tab. You have a painting of this. I think she is a mermaid with pink hair holding like a little otter creature. It's like basically right at the bottom, and I think this piece is really strong, and you should move it up.
Oh, yeah, this one.
Because this is a great painted example. Um, that I think is, yeah, I think it's stronger than some of the other pieces above it. And I think you should move it up, in my opinion.
And one thing to consider with the whole line versus lineless thing is you can start to incorporate those lines how you are here as like, color holds on those lines, and maybe not working with always, and you were doing that in other places, but for instance, on your character design page, the character had red lines around their red hood, and it just added a snap to it that was really professional looking. Um, and if you do that just with tone, usually I recommend, like, in certain situations lasso tool works, but in others you need to like paint it really carefully. So it depends how you want to spend your time as well. Um, the thing for me that stood out on this page was maybe not fitting in the most was probably the comics, just because it's a slightly different art form. But I understand it's probably like, but where do I put them? That's always a challenge when you only have a small sampling of a certain kind of work. They're beautiful, but I just don't know if they fit.
Do you have more comics? Because if you have more comics, I like your comic work a lot, and you can have its own tab. But I wouldn't do that unless you have like
Yeah,
at
if you
least
do make
3.
more or have
Yeah.
more.
But I like your comic style a lot.
The problem with comics is you really got to make sure every panel holds up. And if you don't mind me giving a little critique on this, I think hands, like these hands are great up here. They're working really well. But then down here, this one is confusing me a little bit. So that's probably hands is probably the one thing that's standing out to me on this page that I'm like, yeah, I think that could be worked on a little bit more in certain panels. This is kind of a scattered critique, but hopefully it's helpful. Yeah, hands are always tough. I still have to get reference for them. And that's one big thing I didn't put in my presentation, but that I recommend is, so there's different stages to an art piece. There's like the idea stage, and then, there's the finishing stage. Well, between that, there's sort of the rough stage. And I think that's a stage that is easy to rush. And what I mean by that is that's a great time to get that right photo reference and really get that draftsmanship in the right place. And that might be partially why I feel some of your line art is stronger than some of your nonlinear art, because you've had to commit to a certain decision. Whereas when you're painting, it's easy to just sort of throw a shape in there and be like, all right, I think that's good, without having to think like, how does the seaweed actually work or something like that. So maybe that's one deeper kind of mechanic of it that your lines are really bringing out nicely, is that you really have thought through this figure and how they sit in space. Because, it's always easy to rush a certain part of the process, especially when you're under a deadline. So, yeah. Yeah, we'll go check out the sketches and studies. Did you want to comment on that, Nala?
Oh, just I want to see more. I like your lines are very fluid. The figure work is great. I'd even love to see like even more gestural stuff, because um I don't know. I like looking at people's sketchbooks. Like, there's a lot of artists who had sketchbook pages or like a tab for sketchbooks, and I would like, even though that's not what I'm hiring for, I would go look at people's sketches because the process work and the unfinished stuff says a lot about an artist. And so if I was like on the fence about someone and they had like a sketchbook stuff and I could see sort of how their brain thinks and how like what goes into their design process, I'd feel more confident in hiring someone if like they have like portraiture studies and like other things like that, because I'm specifically again hiring character artists, so looking for anatomy, face studies, like anything like that, and like in all the sketchy unfinished stuff is just so good.
Yeah, I agree. And what I like about seeing some of this too is you'll have like these gems, like this foot right here is so good. Like, and so it'll show like the peaks of your observation and ideation, and that slowly levels you up in general um, to getting closer and closer to, the type of look you're going for. I did really like your character design page. I love the emotion in it, how expressive it all is, but then how clear it all is too. So I would love to see more of this. And I think you had visual development separated out. And I wonder if there's a way to just combine some of this, because a lot of this is characters too. So I don't know, maybe just consolidating some of that would help. I had to do that recently with my site. I had to go from like 4 tabs and I dropped it down to 2. I feel like it's a much better experience.
I have a random question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think I see a lot of people that sometimes do like projects all stay together, and then some people that do like I have a character design tab and I have a bunch of character designs from different projects on the same page, and then an environments tab with the same thing. Which do you think is better, or in what circumstances is each better?
I have an opinion if you'd like to hear my
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Nala.
um So what I did for mine is I put all the stuff from like my big project that I did like at the end of my time at SCAD. I had this big thing called Mirage of the Red Sun, and I put all the work for that in a tab on my website. But some of that work is also in other folders, so that you can see it in like my illustration tab. You can see some of the character designs in the character design tab, because like as an art director and like a random person who might be looking at your work, the names of your projects, like Mirage of the Red Sun, means nothing to me. Like I don't know what that means. And so if your tabs only have your project names on it, and I'm looking for character designs, I don't know what to click on. And then I get frustrated because again, I'm like whipping through these so fast. So in my opinion, I think like it's good to have all the stuff together, but I feel like you should also put separate the stuff out so that you have character design, and say you have like 4 projects, all the character designs from these 4 projects are in one spot, and then you can put all the environments in another spot, so then if someone's looking for something specific they can go to that. And then maybe if I click on an environment from project 1, maybe there's excuse me, a link to see the rest of the stuff from that same project or something. It just depends on what website builder you're using to set everything up. But that's my personal preference. Just because someone who's looking at your site uh, is not going to have context for the names of all your projects, especially if they're looking for something specific. But if you're applying to, say, a film or something, and you know that the person looking at it is going to be looking at everything and or wants to see visual development in general, that's when you send them the link to that specific tab with that specific project in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it also depends where you're showing it. So, like, I think a website is very different than like an art station, where for me at least, art stations seem to thrive on being project based. Like, it just feels right at an art station to do like, okay, this project had this in it, this project had that in it. And you can organize like character designs as one of your art station things. but I don't know. It just seems to flow better on ArtStation. It seems most people do more project-based stuff on ArtStation.
Yeah.
Maybe,
And
maybe they meta tag it with character design or something. But
I am biased because I use ArtStation to host my website through it, because then I only have to upload once and it goes to both my ArtStation and my website. Because I
yeah.
have ADHD and keeping my website updated is hard enough.
Mhm.
um, and I like, I'm so sorry, I'm dying. One sec.
No, you're not. You're getting better.
See, it's good until I talk. Yeah, so I use ArtStation for my website, and ArtStation lets you make like secret tabs almost, which I think is what people are talking about. What Yanni did, you can make a page to put specific art into a folder on ArtStation, but then you can make that page slash folder slash tab not show up on the main site navigation. So you basically would need a link to be able to find that page. But that way you can curate portfolios specifically for certain things. And I saw a lot of the people who applied to the thing that I'm hiring for make secret tabs on their sites specifically for this application, where they dumped all the stuff that is most relevant to what I'm
Mhm.
looking for in that tab. And then they sent me that tab, which you can only access if you have the specific link. But yeah.
Yeah. That's a great way to just tailor your application to somebody. So, and it's easy to blow through this and be not notice the strengths in this too. And we talked about your lines and all, but also I think your use of shape is really interesting. You seem to have a very fun time playing with shapes, and that's appealing to me as an artist. Um, like you seem to understand like hierarchy of shape, like scale, like making sure this guy's really big and this one's really small, and this person's hat is bigger than their body, but this person's wings are bigger than their hat. Just giving variety. Seems like you have a lot of fun with that, and that's good. That's a really good thing to have fun with. Well, hopefully
Can't
that's
see
kind of
me, but I'm
helpful.
nodding.
Hopefully that's helpful. Us just jabbering on about it. If you want more specific feedback, feel free to reach out to me and we could like talk about what your actual goals are, because it's kind of hard to do it. We're just literally giving you our vibe on it. But if you have specific goals with it, that can help too.
I think the last thing I want to say is that your life drawing illustration with the mer person um, really stood out to me. Like that's what made me remember your portfolio out of the 300 that I looked at. Because when I saw this, I was like, wait, I've seen this. I've seen this. And
Which,
that's what made me ask, did you apply to my thing? Because it's just so memorable. And I don't know if I just haven't seen this concept. I don't know if it's, um, maybe it's just I've never seen anyone do it before, but like this shows knowledge of perspective, the lighting, all of these figures in a space. It's also just a fun. It's just a fun, a fun illustration, and it's unique because yeah, I remember
this
it,
one.
and it's
Got
very
it. Yeah,
cool.
I was totally not sure which one you were talking about, but I got it now. Yeah, it's a really fun idea.
I like the person who's just asleep in the corner.
Yeah. Cool. I think we had another portfolio, right?
Yeah, there's one more Salem.
Pull this one up. Ooh, much more moody already. I see. I scroll. Yeah, I wasn't sure I needed to scroll there, so that's a little confusing. So, like, what I'm getting already is that this site is really clean and clear as to where the work is, but it's losing some of the punch because of that, because the images are smaller and some of them are like lots of little things. And that's a strategic choice sometimes. Sometimes you want to do that. But just like scrolling through the main page, they're not jumping out to me as much as the size of these images are. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're making work. Now I'm going to try clicking on them, see what happens. Okay. Okay, so I can scroll like this. So that's one way it gets bigger. So that's good.
Salem, what did you use to make your site? Excuse me. Carbon made. Excuse me.
Carbon made is good. I use that too. Yeah, it's got a clean, very, very clean interface.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Carbon made. It's like so easy to make a really clean website.
What sort of thing are you interested in getting into, Salem?
I'm kind of like varied at the moment because I'm in the animation major, but I want to do concept art, and I'm kind of like I've been really leaning towards like props and environments lately.
Uh-huh.
But I also like doing characters, so I'm kind of like exploring.
Totally. I get that. What sort of games would you want to work on?
I like stuff like Hades, like
Okay. That's what I was thinking, like
where you have
indie,
like like indie, and I also
but
like just like fighting games.
yeah, kind of more isometric, or are you open to like flat, like ICO kind of stuff?
I like isometric, but I also like games like Gris, where it's like a side scroller.
Yeah. Cool.
I could also see like visual novels.
Some of these backgrounds feel the most cohesive to me of anything. Like as I'm going through stuff, like it feels like it all goes together. But it is, I know these are like in plain sight, but an art director might miss them, because they're not next to portfolio. Just in the speed that they're having to go. And Nala, you can confirm or deny that, but
yeah, I don't know how you God, I'm dying. I'm so sorry. Please cooperate. Okay, cool. If there's a way to stick these four things like as sub underneath the word portfolio, so that you can click on portfolio, and then they should be visible. Like I don't want to do the thing where I have to click on portfolio to make these four options appear. But if you could make them be under the word portfolio, I think that would just make more sense in my brain.
Yeah.
I feel like
used the like projects thing on Carbon Made to make the four little tabs, so I might be able to mess around with that.
Yeah, I feel like organizing these, like throwing some more of like these environments, and maybe instead of it saying just background art, you have an environments and props area. Like I feel like just grouping these into different sections would work better than having them mixed in my opinion, just so it feels a little more cohesive and organized. Because at the moment, as I scroll through this, I'm still asking like, okay, but what do they really want to do? Um, and so that's, I think, where I'm left is trying to figure that out. But then I come into these tabs and it feels really intentional to me because it is intentional. I mean, you group them a certain way on purpose. So I don't know, maybe grouping things in a certain way like that. It's okay to mix in different projects on one portfolio page whenever you need to. But it's really tough when you're still exploring, right? The moment that you know what you want to do, it's going to get way easier.
Yeah, 'cause I'm kind of like in between games, but also animations, but also I want to write and illustrate, and I'm just like,
Yeah. And that's where it's okay to have some of this as your portfolio, and some of it is your IP that you're slowly developing that isn't necessarily like mixed in with all of this. It may be still a tab on here, but maybe it's its own separate section. Um, and then, you know, it's organized a different way than your portfolio is. Because your portfolio is geared at someone like Nala who's going to be going through it super fast along with 300 others.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the goal of that. The goal of you doing something that might be your own original IP is for more of a casual viewer, I would say. Maybe you're pitching it and then it needs to be really concise for an editor or whoever is picking it up. But when it comes to like job stuff, I think try to keep it like geared towards a certain role in the position.
Yeah, I agree. I think because your tagline is concept artist, your like portfolio should be curated for like general concept art. So I might take out like some of your more illustrations, like your skeleton hideout and some of your more rendered backgrounds, because in my opinion, all the stuff at the bottom of this page is all like the concept art stuff that I'd want to see. I feel like at the top of this, if you decide to curate this particular section of your website to be for concept art,
Mhm.
I think all of your strongest stuff is at the bottom right now. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Like, I
Yeah.
really like this isometric room that you have. Like, this layout is just really clean. It's really nice to look at, and it's a strong piece. Um, Same with like this tower tower ideation side piece. I like that concept too.
Yeah. So that's my thoughts, and hopefully what Nala and I said is helpful. It's heading in a good direction. I'd say just continue making and see what it is that you get most excited about, and that makes you want to draw. Um, and maybe you have something, there's some reason that you like props and environments, that's worth considering. Like maybe you already like a certain kind of prop and you're like super into something. Like my mom's super into teacups, like that's her thing. Maybe you have a thing and then that's going to take you to the next level. I think of um I'm blanking on her name. She goes by Shluma on the internet, but she did these historically accurate Disney princesses, and that's like what got her work like internet famous. So maybe you'll find something within that realm that you really gravitate to.
Salem,
Thank you.
if you do more props, I want to see more spears because I like your spears a lot.
Thanks.
And I kind of wish your sword temper swords were displayed like the
Yeah.
spears so that I can see them better when I'm scrolling through the thumbnails.
I agree.
Because your copy text
I really like the
is
bottles.
interesting. Your copy text is interesting, but I also feel like it is a lot, and I want to be able to look at the actual like sword designs.
I originally laid that out for my flat book in 390, where my professor was like, "Yeah, put all of the information about them on there." And
Oh, I see.
yeah,
Understandable.
Yeah, a quick edit will solve
definitely
that.
want to reorganize that one.
Yeah, worth it. You put in good time on those and they look cool.
Those are probably like one of my favorite things to draw, honestly.
Good. Yeah, that's
Do
great.
more. They look
Mhm.
great.
You clearly had fun with them. Look at the repetition and the patterns in it. So yeah. Well, cool. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing that. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, very much.
Cool. Well, I think that's what I have time for. Thank you for having me, though, and this has been a blast. It's so fun to talk with everyone and to, I hopefully help you on your journey.
Of course, Steven. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It was
Thank
very,
you.
very helpful hearing from you.
Yeah, and thanks for chiming in, Nala, with your experience. I didn't know you had gotten that role. Congrats. That's awesome.
It's Very, very brand new.
Well, I'm sure you will rock it as you have done with everything else. So.
Aw, thanks.
Well, have a great Friday night, everyone. Enjoy
you,
your
Steven.
weekend. And I look forward to talking to y'all again soon.
Have a good night. Thank you so much for coming.
Yep, thanks.
Everything.
Bye.
Bye.